Musk was supposed to go to India a little more than a week ago and called off that trip, said, he had heavy obligations at Tesla, is how he put it. Tesla proceeds to release really crummy first quarter earnings, but Musk kind of pulls a rabbit out of a hat in announcing this change in strategy to get cheaper vehicles to market faster. How exactly he's going to do that is a little fuzzy, but the gist of it is to use existing manufacturing lines to make these new vehicles that could be ready as soon as late this year or early next year. In the process of making that pivot, he clearly needs to sort of get incremental revenue after a first quarter where sales were really weak. They had the lowest revenue since early 2022 levels, and in China, one clear way that they could do that is by offering the system that they've marketed as full self-driving in the U.S. Importantly, we should note it is not a self-driving system, but that hasn't stopped them from marketing it as such for years now.
All right, so Craig, let's focus on this weekend, which seems to be moving the stock today. Am I to understand that getting the Chinese approval for this driver assistance was up in the air, like there was a risk they wouldn't get it, and then Elon hops on a jet, flies over, and saves the day? Is that what happened?
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily the case that this was, kind of an overnight thing. Actually, the last time that Musk was in China, this was something that we reported at the time was on the agenda. It's been something that Tesla has been after for quite some time. And it's increasingly a way that, car makers are competing in China is how advanced is your driver assistance system, that keeps you from crashing, that keeps you in your lane, that allows you in some cases to take your hands off the wheel. But in all cases, you absolutely are responsible for the car. And no companies are taking responsibility, legal responsibility, if you get into a crash. With the exception of some very small sort of limited fleets in contained areas. And there are quirks, as you might imagine, by market for what is required to be able to offer these systems that really need to be safe and also need to have controls for data collection and the cameras used to navigate the surroundings that these cars are going to need to pilot around. And that's been a hang up for Tesla and other international companies that they need to in all cases work with local Chinese companies for things like mapping and navigation. So one of the key sort of takeaways from this trip was Tesla agreeing to do that with Baidu in China.
So who owns the stuff?
It is importantly, it's a matter of ownership and where it's kept. And so, this has come up years ago, actually. Tesla had a bit of a hang-up where their cars were banned from, being in the area of military compounds and other sort of sensitive parts of China out of concerns about, any information that cars were gathering. And, there were concerns about whether any data was going from Tesla's China operations back to the U.S. And so Tesla needed to sort of reassure China that, any data collected in China will stay in China. And so that has been, something that they've had to sort of acquiesce to as of, several years ago. But they needed to still sort of, clear, approval for making sure that their T's were crossed and I's were dotted in that respect, and they needed this deal with Baidu. It does seem to be the case that they need to meet other conditions in order for FSD to be offered in China. It's still not a done deal, but what sort of hoops they still have to jump through are a bit unclear at this point. That's not stopping the market from getting very excited about this.
So, how does this change, if at all, kind of the competitive landscape for Tesla in China? I know you guys have been reporting a lot how some of the local EV makers have really become very good and very competitive.
Yeah, I think it absolutely is something that's been missing for Tesla, that assuming all goes well here, it will no longer be a sort of strike against them among consumers who really, want the most cutting edge technology. It remains to be seen how big a deal it will be for Tesla from a revenue standpoint, because we don't know at this point how much Tesla will be looking to charge for it. We don't know, to what extent they may have to share some revenue with some of their partners. It's not clear whether Baidu maybe gets a cut. In the U.S., Tesla and throughout the world, Tesla has made a point to really be, want to be vertically integrated. And that's, fancy talk for in control of its own destiny. They were willing to sort of acquiesce in this case, I think because they really could use this boost in China at a time when their lineup is getting a bit tired and they're losing a lot of market share to companies like BYD.
Well, this also raises the question, too. It doesn't take a lot of news to get Tesla stock moving. Not that a trip to China wasn't a big deal, but like you said, there's so many questions as to the actual revenue driver and what it's going to mean. I mean, you have to wonder, it's not going to take a lot for any kind of shorts, Craig, to cover.
I think that's right. And this is also a name that, options traders absolutely love. It's sort of like the meme stock that has lasted as a meme stock as that craze has sort of faded away. And so, anytime, to your point, Musk is able to sort of get some momentum with, the narrative, it tends to lead to big swings. So, early this year, I think he lost control of that narrative. And, it's not at all a mystery as to why that is, looking at last week's earnings. But I think he was really able to sort of change what people were talking about last week. We'll see whether or not, this is mostly talk as opposed to, going to lead to real sort of meaningful change in Tesla's earnings trajectory, which has not been trending in the right direction.